So, a warm good morning to one and all, respected head of the department, today's eminent speakers, and other faculties and my dear friends. It is a moment of great privilege and honor for me to extend a hearty welcome to all of you. And today, with this welcome address, we are entering into our second day of international webinar on women and development. First of all, I would like to welcome the strength of the department, our head of the department, Dr. Anida V, to the webinar. Welcome you, ma'am. I would also like to welcome the other faculty, Sri Siddik R, Assistant Professor and the Organizing Secretary of the webinar, Dr. Manju S. Nair, Professor and Dean, Faculty of Social Science, Dr. Shija S. R, Professor and Department of Economics, and Dr. Christabel P.J., Associate Professor, Department of Economics. Next, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the key persons of the session. Today's speakers, I welcome Dr. Dharshana Sreedhar, who is from University of Wisconsin, Madison, and ma'am will be presenting about role of women in the screen. And our second speaker for today's session is Sir Shijith VP from IIT Hyderabad on Nakusa Unwanted as my name. I welcome you both for today's session. I also welcome the moderator, Ms. Surya Thampi, MPhil Scholar, Department of Economics, University of Kerala. Finally, yet importantly, I welcome Jatin Susan Thomas, First MA Economics, University of Kerala, who will be delivering the vote of thanks. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us for today's session. So I invite Ms. Surya Thampi for moderating the session.
Okay, thank you, Gouri. Yesterday, we had a first day of the fourth international webinar, and today we are on the second day, fifth section, and welcome you all. Today we have two presenters, Dr. Dharshana Sreedhar, University of Wisconsin, Madison, on her paper, Role of Women in Screen. The perception of a society, particular society or culture towards women is often a reflection of the kind of development that can be expected in the economy. And the portrayal of the women in media and popular culture plays a very vital role in influencing the perception towards women. Historically, women has been predominantly portrayed most often as damsels in distress or are subject to objectification. This section will be a very interesting take on the role of women in screen. Okay, welcome you, ma'am. And another paper, it's not paper, it's actually a documentary, an interesting documentary by Dr. Shijith VP, IIT Hyderabad, and he will be presenting a documentary, and the documentary is all about Nagusa Unwanted is my name. I'll do a brief introduction about the documentary. The documentary focuses on the peculiar naming practice prevailing in rural Maharashtra and its distress consequences for girls and women. And this documentary was officially selected for screening in reputed film festivals like Mumbai International Film Festival 2018, International Documentary and Short Film Festival of Kerala 2018, South Asian Short Film Festival Kolkata 2019, and Science Short Film Festival Kochi 2017. So personally, I feel research and filmmaking are expressions of creativity. Welcome you also, sir, to the section. Now, before moving to the section, I would like to say something about the time schedule. So presenters, for your kind information, the time limit is 15 to 20 minutes, and make sure you can complete it at that time because we have to move on to the other sections and complete it within the time limits. And to begin with, I call upon Dr. Dharshana Sreedhar. So ma'am, welcome you, ma'am. And I hand over the section to this ma'am. So please start, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And, thanks to Department of Economics for doing such a great conference. I know it's not an easy process. So, kudos to you all for organizing this. And I really love the active participation of students as part of this. So I'll just share my screen. Give me a sec. So I took the liberty to actually work with the title a little bit. So it's called Cinema of Accountability, Feminist Prisms to Understand Activist Documentary. So before I get into the feminist part of today's presentation, I just want to give you a broader outline of what documentary means, because in most instances, we know intuitively what documentary means, but not in a sense of the kind of rhetorical counter narrative impulse that some documentaries have. there is no one way of describing a documentary. So documentary is an instance of non-fiction filmmaking, and it can involve both narrative as well as non-narrative forms. So documentary form implies documenting the world around you. It also implies the use of technology. So it's a technologically mediated form, which also assumes a kind of an objective approach. It's out for contestation whether there is anything objective about recording the world, and camera itself as a kind of a very subjective tool, because it depends on who is recording the event which is happening in front of the camera, what is the ideological motivations behind the recording, etc. But at the same time, there are also personal elements that you can explore through documentary forms. The focus of documentary as a kind of a distinct creative treatment of actuality started with the documentary filmmaker John Grierson. John Grierson is a Scottish filmmaker, and he basically coined the term documentary. And it was in a review of Robert Flaherty's film Moana in a newspaper called New York Sun, where John Grierson wrote about documentary as what he called the creative treatment of actuality. But at the same time, you have photographers like Edward Muybridge, who were making use of photographic studies of motion as a precursor to film to actually document the movement. So what he was trying to do was to, find how you can see horses ride, and especially when they have the four legs in the air. So he was trying to capture different movements, across a time period, like in terms of like instantaneous photography as a technique. And he used camera as a scientific instrument that can produce some kind of evidence and objective documentation. So documentary films actually offer us claims towards reality. So there is no one reality out there, right? There are multiple realities out there, and it depends on who is saying the reality, how is reality framed and conveyed to you, and under what context are you watching this? So that's where, we need to actually think of documentary as a kind of a really complicated text where there is no one meaning out there. Just like how we watch films, there is also a fictional element that you can build into the narrative of documentary. So documentary have a privileged connection to the truth. What documentary is trying to show us is basically truth claims towards a particular version of the truth. And it's a constructedness of the truth. Like I said earlier, there is no one truth out there, but different versions, different perspectives of the truth, depending on who is viewing this particular event, under what context, under what circumstances. So all of this goes back to the question about ontology of the film. The idea that whatever is filmed also needs to have something in front of a camera. So the camera is not an objective agent documenting the reality or events that is happening in front of it, but there is also an indexical truth that the camera assumes is possible, and that is what documentary is trying to play with. So documentary's truth effect and truth claim is partly because we see and we think about images as indexical, that images can be documented, images have meanings, and you're able to build the larger assemblage of meanings through, this idea of capturing the world through the objective, camera that's able to record things for you. So when you think of documentary, you also have this idea of voice of the God narrative, right? So, some of the documentaries will have a narration where it's a third person narration, but you will be given a sense of what the documentary means through this voice. Mostly it's a male voice. In many documentaries in the West, it's a voice of a white man or a person who represents the Western civilization, who is framing the documentary and the kind of larger questions the documentary is trying to explore for you. And that's not what you will be seeing in Shijith's documentary. That's the kind of interesting kind of counter picture that Shijith is offering for us. So both image and sound are central to the kind of documentary claim that that you are able to see in terms of what the documentary is trying to capture for you. So a documentary scholar called Bill Nichols, in his work called Voice of the Documentary, said that documentary has different voices. And I'm just broadly kind of dividing it into 4 sections. One is the direct address of the Graysonian tradition. So John Grayson, the Scottish filmmaker, the kind of films that he endorsed was in the line of the voice of the God narration, where there is a person who's framing the narration for the audience. And critical spectatorship is important for documentary. You can think about the documentaries that you have watched, all of which assumes that there is a critical spectator who's out there wanting to know. You're curious to know about what's being given to you, what's being shown to you. And the second documentary categorization is cinema verity. Cinema verity would actually mean that there is no mediation involved and the camera is trying to directly capture immediately what's happening in front of it. So there is a directness and immediacy and untampered nature that is associated with cinema verity. The third one is direct address, and direct address actually would involve interview-based documentation, and that's some of which you will see again in Shijith's documentary, where a lot of interviews and excerpts of interviews are used in the documentary as text that is able to give the reader a larger picture of the context in which the film is set, what's the larger questions the film is trying to grapple with, etc. And here, there is a role of witness which becomes important. We are witnessing what is showed in front of us through the documentary, but the people who are in the documentary, they're also witnesses. They're witnessing something. They're part of this larger experiential narrative that is giving them a kind of a leverage in terms of what they are saying. They are saying they're making some claims, but the truth value associated to their claims is also validated by the fact that they've experienced it, they have gone through it. And that alongside documentaries' association of indexicality, that there is an image that can be captured without much mediation, much tampering, gives us this idea of non-fiction film as real or non-fiction film as truth. So, when you talk about fiction film or a feature film, you say that, it's all staged for us. It's all, shot because there is a script. There are people who are, writing the script, rewriting the script, and they're all edited together. But even documentary is a scripted process. But what's interesting is that the narrative, the storyline of a documentary emerges only in the editing phase. When you have the footage and you put the footage together and see what is emerging out of it. So the kind of the bare-bone approach that many of these documentaries have emerged from this different strategies documentary filmmakers make use of in order to convey to the audience the kind of questions that they are grappling with. So unlike a fiction film where there is an immersive way in which you are engaged in the film, when you know that it is all a matter of illusion, in the case of documentary, the documentary filmmaker is also expecting a critical spectator who's able to think and rationally deliberate and be part of the process. So sometimes documentaries may not give everything to you. It will expect that you struggle and grapple with this data given to you, the material and images and visuals given to you, and understand what is the underlying principle that this documentary is offering for you. Moving on to the final one, self-reflexive documentaries. They are basically interested in mixing observational passages with interviews and use of intertitles. They are kind of interested in experimenting with the form, where it is not about an unmediated way of recording the reality happening in front of the camera, but also playing with the form, where sometimes you have the documentary filmmaker present in the scene. You see the face of the documentary filmmaker. You see the documentary filmmaker interacting with the respondents. So it's a very interesting way of incorporating the positionality of the documentary filmmaker, because any documentary you make, it is also mediated by your own positionality. What gets made, what are the footage that you want to use, how do you edit it, what is the larger narrative you want to convey. So all of them are very subjective, and it is dependent on the positionality of who is doing it. So I just want to draw your attention to this particular film called Thin Blue Line. It's by Errol Morris. It's a 1988 film. And this is a film which makes use of a rhetorical, value of the documentary. And it actually turns this idea upside down. So this basically got a man off the death row in Texas after the film caused the authorities to re-examine the facts of his case. So the film was itself invested in trying to demystify the fact that everything that you're showing is the truth. But it's asking us to think about this idea of how this material is staged for us. All the materials that you see in documentaries, just like the feature films, are created with certain logic in mind of creating a certain set of immediate responses from the audience. So the audience is important for documentary as much as it is for, let's say, feature film. So moving on to the idea of larger feminist discourse, and what are the points of intersection that we can find in documentary studies and feminist movement? So global feminism, when you talk about in the larger transnational scape, it's basically trying to ask us to think about the multiple iterations of feminisms happening in different parts of the world, which are very contextual and localized, and it's emerging from the grassroots level. At the same time, it's asking us to say that there is no one version of feminism. Western feminism should not be the vantage point from which we are looking at, let's say, what's happening in India or Pakistan or South Korea. So critical perspective on the need to demystify that feminism is just one thing. And it's also asking us to move beyond West as the undifferentiated sender. So through that, we are also able to accommodate and appreciate the differential experiences that constitute feminisms. For instance, what is feminisms in a very local context of India, in let's say a panchayat level kind of collective of women emerging, might not translate equally to a feminist based in Europe, for whom the idea of collective action is entirely different. So global feminism is asking us to actually understand this kind of contextual variations and differences, and account that when you talk about the idea of a united group of people trying to make collective structural change. So it's asking us to question the universalizing tendencies for generalizations, and incorporate, on the other hand, local histories and conditions that shape women's experiences. And look, global feminism is also interested in the questions of colonialism and larger power differentials, and how the global relations of power influence women's gender roles. So Julia Blissage is a documentary scholar, and she's also feminist. And she wrote this really powerful and impactful essay called "The Political Aesthetics of the Feminist Documentary Film." And this was during the peak time of women's movement, and especially questions about reproductive rights, and the need for women to have autonomy over their decisions in terms of their workforce participation, etc., came to be discussed widely. So she came up with this idea of feminist documentary form. How do you define it? So she says that feminist documentary as a form works with the larger political impetus of consciousness raising group. So consciousness raising is an important part of women's mobilization and collective action in different parts of the world. So she says that there is a very self-conscious way in which political momentum can be collectivized, both in terms of form and content. And that's exactly what feminist documentary film is trying to do. And they feature women's lives and their narratives, which are told directly in front of the camera to complicate this idea of a public-private dichotomies. And so the idea of collective, action and collective rendering of their experiences becomes important. And the main aim is to empower women to tell their own stories and become better storytellers who are able to convey their own experiences that resonate with the larger questions of power and inequality. So this is also the idea of naming. You have to explicitly name your experiences, because there is no one else other than you who would know the kind of challenges that you have gone through. So some of the questions they explored around the feminist documentary production strategies were also about assertion of women's bodily rights, sexual pleasure, etc. How am I with the time? Can you please tell me how much time I have left?
10 minutes.
I have 10 minutes more, or I...
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Nice
just tell...
so we can take 10 minutes.
All right. Just tell...
Okay.
All right, just tell me when I am like 2 minutes, to the deadline, so that I can wrap it up.
Okay.
All right. So So that's where the question about cinema of accountability comes in. How do you make accountable cinema that is able to resonate with the political intent and also the consciousness raising and collectivity building that's part and parcel of women's movement? So what Julia Lesage was interested in is the way in which women's collective were trying to push for policy change. So for them, social movement and filmmaking has to go hand in hand. And there is a need for it being part of the larger questions about advocacy, for which they needed self-reflexive media productions that are able to talk about power. Like I said earlier, the question about positionality, who is making the film? The experience of a Dalit woman is not going to be same as a Savarna woman making a film about Dalit causes, right? So you need to be understanding about the structural equation of power and how power operates when you're making films. So they actually consider filmmaker as an insider, who is a cultural insider, who knows about the the ins and outs of the group and the different kind of questions on accessibility. Who can access resources? Who are the ones who are being removed from this larger resources that are available, which the state promises that they're giving to the vulnerable and underprivileged, but they are not actually receiving it. So you need to know about how power operates. So, the larger questions about, Foucauldian notion of the capillary notion of power, where everyone is kind of indirectly part and parcel of this capillary system, where power kind of exudes such kind of impact that, you cannot make a decision where, you are autonomous. Your life is also kind of integrally connected to many other people and many other stakeholders whose life decisions are also connected to what you do and the kind of life choices that you make. So cinema of accountability that the feminist documentary filmmakers made were also interested in, charting the socio-cultural factors that condition gendered experience. And they wanted to be used for pedagogical purpose. They wanted to be used as a tool for educating these women to have the self-realization, where they feel they're comfortable to talk about their experiences to a group of women whom they think will be empathetic towards them and give them a kind of a hearing without being judgmental and evaluate. So there are a lot of filmmakers who do this feminist, impulse towards making documentary. And I just want to introduce you to Obaid Chinoy, who is from Pakistan, who has made a series of documentaries focusing on gender violence and honor killing. And so the formal features of documentary filmmaking, what are we looking for in terms of the techniques that these filmmakers are using when they call their films feminist documentary? And most of these films will have a realist documentary structure. The realism here would mean that it resonates with the questions, of how they are negotiating their lived realities, the kind of larger power structures that operate in and around them. And some of these films actually used a 16mm format. And this format is interesting because that's being used for educational films in churches, libraries, unions, etc. Yeah, yeah.
3 more minutes left. Yeah. Hello.
2 more minutes, right? Okay, all
3
right.
more minutes.
3 more minutes. Okay, cool. Thank you. And they draw inspiration from the cinema verite tradition that I explained earlier, where there is a directness with which you capture the events that happen in front of the camera. You're not editing it. At the same time, you're observing it and trying to capture what is happening in front of the camera so that you're able to document it. And they also, emphasize on building trust between the filmmaker and the subject, which is very important because there are a lot of exploitative practices when it comes to documentary, where documentary subjects and documentary filmmakers, there is a huge gap separating them. You make a documentary, but you really do not know much about what happened to the documentary subject. So documentary subjects are always seen as vulnerable. And there is always a question about ethics and the need to ensure the safety of the documentary subjects, which are again the larger questions that documentary filmmakers are kind of grappling with. And they also work on domestic space and informality, and they try to de-hierarchize the process. Filmmaking is a very hierarchical structure, and I'm sure that Shijith will have more to tell us about his own experience making the documentary. So what feminist documentary filmmakers do is to make this a collective process where you're trying to actually think of a horizontal comradeship rather than a vertical top-down system, where collective viewpoint is foregrounded in mise-en-scène and soundtrack, and making knowledge as something which is shared by the community. All right, so I have only 2 minutes left, so I am just quickly going to show you a little bit of Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, whose film A Girl in the River. If you get a chance, take a look at it. It's basically a film which is asking about the idea of forgiveness. How do you actually forgive your dear and near ones, your family members who want to kill you because you want to marry someone outside your clan and your tribal network? And the film is basically about that. And once you watch the film, you'll have more questions about the question of ethics that I mentioned earlier. So you can actually have multiple reading of this film. One is a contextual reading, placing this film in the larger tradition of documentary practices in Pakistan. And second is about the feminist praxis. Like Julia Lesage talks about a certain variation of feminist intervention in documentary studies. So how does Chena Obaid actually works within that tradition? Third is about mode of production and what is the production pattern that Obaid is trying to do in this documentary. And the fourth one is a regional specific and cultural coding, which many of us will be able to understand because of the South Asian, pan-South Asian geographical connection with the cultural codes, honor killing, and also the close-knit family structures, which allow us, which makes it very difficult for us even to go against one's own parents. Just think about the Anubama incident, which happened very recently in Kerala. So I will stop here with with this last slide on activist documentary, where what does it mean for us to actually talk about it? I don't have time to actually show you the sequence, but just to give you an inkling of what this means. This basically shows a filmmaker going to jail, to a prison where the girls of Saba's father and uncle are right now waiting there, waiting for the court hearing. So she goes and basically shoots them where they are incriminating themselves, where they're saying that we do not regret what we did. She happened to be lucky that she got saved, but we still believe in what we do. So this is a question I want to leave you with. The question of ethics around what are the things that a documentary filmmaker can record? Where is the vulnerability when it comes to the documentary subjects, and especially the power equation that's separate a filmmaker like Chena Obaid from the otherwise, vulnerable community out there, and who has given her, the opportunity to get inside the prison and shoot them, shoot this particular sequence. And this might also remind you about India's Daughter, the documentary by Leslie Woodwin, which had similar ethical problems. So I'll stop here, but I hope to have more conversations when we are talking with Shijith. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Actually, it was a wonderful presentation because we never thought of like how a documentary can reflect feminism, what the what a women problem faces, and all. Because it was really interesting. I thought if we had plenty of time, we would have gone like discussion and all because this is so interesting. But somehow we have to stop it here. Now I welcome Shijith VP, IIT Hyderabad, and it's another documentary which reflects the problems of women. Okay, welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you. First of all, actually, I will just share a presentation, then we can screen a documentary. And thank you, Dharshana. It's a wonderful session. So basically, I also agree with you that the position, or even I am even my position itself. I'm a privileged gender person, so I have that privilege while doing this documentary. So definitely there are problems with my documentary. So while seeing the while doing that also and screening in even shooting time also, but I tried my best that I will discuss later. So right now I'm just going through that how this documentary happened. So I'm a PhD scholar in departmental design at Hyderabad. It's a documentary. Nagusha Anwani is my name basically. uh, a documentary basically based on my MPhil thesis. My MPhil thesis is on culture, gender discrimination, and exploratory study of Nakusha girls in Satara district of Maharashtra. And also this also got our Dr. P.N. Marigold Gold Medal for Best Researcher, and also presented in annual meet in Santiago, and also published in peer-reviewed journals like Sociological Politics and Economic Political Week. But more than that, for me, that I believe that personally, I believe that usually in academic space, what we are doing, research or thesis, whatever that if you are publishing also, it only reach a very academic space only. That discussion will end in academic sphere. Because so that published articles will only discuss in that. More than that, communicating with or interacting with others, like common people, always we couldn't do that, particularly in academic. So this is the point. I believe that I have to interact with even the research. Even now, also in my thesis, also that PhD thesis also will become a documentary. So that is sort of the I would like to interact with the common people or interact with the visuals. So the thing is, like, even while writing also, I know that it is impossible to write some people's emotions. You can see it in pictures also. They are just as while watching you may realize that they're just as their smile and their emotions. It's impossible to write it in thesis or any article. So only that we can feel through that visuals only. And also it had huge impact. It screened so many schools, colleges, festivals, and other spaces, and also it got even that attention, media attention. Before that, I published the article in PW and Sage, but nobody discussed about the same. But this became after documentary came out. Definitely got a lot of discussion, and also this work itself had a social impact. Like Maharashtra government formed a commission to rename their these nakushas or victims, particularly in their certificates. That's one of the impact. But I know that this is just a this solved only tip of the issue or the only it's very the basic issue or basic the patriarchy is still prevalent in India in everywhere. So that understanding I have. So I think it's only just a small social impact only it happened, and it's also available in true copy YouTube. Anyone can watch. So now I can share a documentary. After that, we can have a discussion.
एक मुलगी झाली. एक मुलगी झाली. बर. दुसरी मुलगी झाली. आणि ही तिसरी मुलगी. आईला ह्या पोरी सगळ्या होत्या, सगळ्या पोरीच होत्या. हिचं नाव नकोसं ठेवा, नको पोरी आता बस झाल्या पोरी.
In Maharashtra, it is quite surprising to know that many parents, even now, naming their daughters as Nakusa, meaning unwanted. It is the most visible manifestation of gender discrimination in our country. in a modern, developed and a progressive state like Maharashtra, even now this incident is happening. A large number of girls in different rural parts of Maharashtra is even named as Nagusa, meaning unwanted, because the parents consider them as unwanted.
म्हणजे नकोच असं म्हणून
मुलगी नको मुलगा पाठीमागे परत मुलगी नको मुलगा पाहिजे होता तर तिने आधी मुलीच झाली ना चौथा मुलगा झाला तेव्हा हे जनावर नकोशी ठेवलं तुम्हाला गेल्या कोणी सांगितलं मला वाटतं.
As we say, they are unwanted. In Marathi, unwanted means Nakushi. Nakushi is she is unwanted. And they name the daughter, who is the third one, fourth one, fifth one, they name her as a Nakushi.
We may very jocularly say what is in the name, but I think there is quite a lot in the name, because name manifests your identity and it is always there from the time you are born till you die.
तुला नकुसा नावाचा अर्थ माहित आहे?
एखादा मुलगा जर होत नसला तर नकुशा मुली नाव असतं.
नकुसा नाव तुला आवडत होतं? नाही.
नाही अजिबात नाही. नसला नाही हे नाव चांगलं नाही.
मुलगी ही नको म्हणजे काय, मग त्याच्यावेळी माझ्या मनामध्येच असा एक न्यूनगंड निर्माण झाला की मी माझ्या आईवडिलांना नको होते का किंवा घरातल्या लोकांना नको होते का. आणि मनामध्ये एक विचार आला की आपण नको असताना जन्माला आलो म्हणजे आपण एखाद्याला त्रासदायक ठरतो की काय. म्हणजे असा विचार मला प्रत्येक वेळी येत राहिला त्या आलेल्या सर्व अडचणीमुळे.
It's just a blind belief that if they Nakushi, if they name the child by Nakushi, then the next delivery may be with a son.
एक पुरी मुली व्हायला लागल्या मला मुलगीची आशा होती म्हणून माणसं म्हणतात ना लोक की नकोसा नाव ठेवलं म्हणजे होत नाही म्हणून असं काय केलं आम्ही ठेवलं तेव्हा आम्हाला काय एवढे रानात आम्ही ठेवलं आपलं
नकुसा का तर मुली नको मुली नकोसा परत एक लक्षात घ्या तिच्या पाठीवर झाली पोरगी परत तिचं काय ठेवलं नाव सीमा म्हणजे आमची सीमा झाली इथून पुढे आमची पुरी होच नाही. पहिले 3 मुली झाल्या आणि परत ती चौथी मग त्याच्यामुळे नको
माणसं म्हणायची नकोसा ठेवली की मग नकोशाच्या मागं मुलगा होईल मग नकोस नाव ठेवलं तिचं.
मुलगा नाही
पोरगा नको म्हणजे पोरगा नाही म्हणून नको ठेवली आम्ही नको होती असं काय नको पाहिजे म्हणतो
लय पुरी होती आता म्हणून ठेवलंय नाव नकोसा ठेवल्यावर पुरी होत नाही तर काय बी असं म्हातारी माणसाने ठेवले आपण ठेवले नकोसा न ठेवल्यावर मुली परत होत नाही तर असे म्हणते.
नकोसा काय 1 2 3 आणि मग आणि जर पोरगीच होयाची म्हणजे नको म्हणून नकोशी ठेवली. लबाड काय बोलण्याची गरज आहे.
पण एक समजूत म्हणजे की बाबा नाव नकोसा ठेवलं की लगेच त्यांना मुलगा होता असे म्हणजे आहे खेडेगाव समजूत.
नकोसा नाव ठेवायचं कारण हेच आहे की बाबा आता इथून पुढे मुल नसावं म्हणजे मुलगी न व्हावी 4 मुलीनंतर यासाठी ते केलेलं आहे बाकी आणि ते आम्ही नाही जुन्या माणसाने केलेलं आहे. रूढ आहे ती ते रूढी प्रभावापर्यंत चाललेलं आहे की बाबा आम्हाला ते नको नको म्हणल्यावर थांबतंय पण कुठलं थांबतंय ते अगदी ते आम्हाला नकोसा म्हणजे ती पुरी झाल्या आणि पोरगा नाही त्यातनं मी म्हणलं म्हणले सगळ्या पुरी लेखा बरोबर समजा वंशाला देवा पाहिजे का नको असं मनाला वाटलं त्या पुरीचा नकोसा ठेवा.
आता तुम्हाला मुलींना नकोसा ठेवल्यास वाईट वाटतं का?
नाही वाईट वाटत नाही
काय वाटतंय आता मी म्हणायला लागली दुसरं कोण नाही
त्यांना कधी नाराजी व्यक्त केली का? नाही का?
नाही मीच म्हणायला लागली आजी
हमको ये नहीं चाहिए थी, तब भी ये पैदा हुई, इसलिए हमने इसका नाम नकुसा रख दिया. ये सारे रिलेटिव्स को बताते हैं लोग, ना केवल और उसके सामने बताते हैं. इसका इतना इम्पैक्ट उस पर होता है.
और बच्चा होता है, बोल नहीं सकता, लेकिन उसके मन में, दिल में कहीं ना कहीं ऐसा दुख रहता है कि अरे मैं क्यों आई इस दुनिया में.
Imagine the situation, these girls have to live with this name throughout their life. It is some kind of a insult, humiliation, frustration, and a depressing effect for these girls and women who are already branded as unwanted by their parents and families.
नकुशी नकुशा नाही नकुशी
का का मला नाही काय वाटत, काहीच नाही वाटत मला. उसको कुछ भी नहीं लगता नको सब
स्त्रियांच्या शिक्षणाची सोय करून देणे हे ज्योतिरावांनी आपले पहिले कर्तव्य मानले. आपल्या जीवन कार्यामध्ये या कामाला ज्योतिरावांनी अग्रस्थान दिले. मी समाजामध्ये जेव्हा सुधारणा घडवून आणू शकतो तेव्हाच माझा समाज चांगल्या रीतीने दिशा घेईल. सर इयत्ता 7वीच्या वर्गाला की स्कॉलरशिपला मी बसलेले होते. तिथे संधी नावाचा एक घटक आहे आणि संधीमध्ये कशी फोड करायची असते शब्दाची हे त्या सरांनी शिकवलं होतं. मात्र एक वैशिष्ट्य सरांनी जाताना एक अभ्यास दिला की तुम्ही तुमच्या स्वतःच्या नावाची फोड करा. मला फोड कशी करायची असते माहिती नव्हतं. दुसऱ्या दिवशी आल्यानंतर मी ती फोड करून काय आणली नाही. सर मला ओरडले आणि सरांनी माझं नाव फळ्यावरती लिहिलं आणि तिथं माझ्या नावाची फोड करून सांगितली की नको असलेली मुलगी म्हणजे नकोशी.
नकी नकी नको नको ऐसे कुछ लोग मुझे चिढ़ाते थे, मुझे बहुत दुख होता.
नक्के म्हणून याच नावानं मला हाक मारली. त्यामुळं ते एक मनामध्ये की त्या असं काय असे निम्म्याच नावात का बोलवत आहेत. एक तर नाव माझं चांगलं नाही आणि त्याची फोड करून ते बोलवत होते. त्यामुळं ते एक मनामध्ये लागत होतं की शेजारी पाजारी त्याच नावानं नकोशी नाही की नक्कीच म्हणून हाक मारायचे. एक शिक्षक होते, इंग्लिशचे सर होते आणि तेच सर मी ऑफिसमध्ये एखादी अडचण घेऊन गेले, शंका घेऊन गेले की मला ते एकच वाक्य बोलायचे, नको नको असली तरी पोरगी ऑफिसमध्ये येते, नको नको असली तरी पोरगी ऑफिसमध्ये येते.
When we give some things to the daughter while going to her in-laws house, we give one small cradle, you may be knowing, jhula, and in that jhula we put Balkrishna. Many of the time asked, why Balkrishna, why not Saraswati, why not Lakshmi? Because they put the small statue of a Balkrishna, because they say even the Kans mama kills 7 daughters, it's okay, but the lady must deliver a Balkrishna.
बारसा हा विषय आमच्या दोघींच्या बाबतीत नाही झाला. भावाच्या बाबतीत मात्र मोठ्यानं गावाला जेवण घातलं. तो पिक्चर एक होता, हळद रुसली कुंकू हसलं, तो पिक्चर ठेवण्यात आला. गावाला सगळा तो कार्यक्रम दाखवण्यात आला जेणेकरून राजा घरात आला या अर्थाने.
जास्त मुलींचं टेन्शन जास्त झाले आणि मुलाचं शिक्षण अजिबात आता परवडणं झालंय. त्यामुळं माझा विचार आहे जगण्यापेक्षा मेलेलं बरं.
हत्ती हत्ती फुगलाच किती, दारूच्या बाटल्या खाल्ल्यास किती, एक नाही दोन 100 पहिला माझा नंबर.
कोणच नाही समजे आम्ही बसूनच आहे. 2 मुलं शाळेला आहेत, खर्च पुरा पडना झालाय, खाण्याचं हे मुसीबत होते. एक टाइम करायचं तेच खायचं. हे माणूस खाण्याला केलेलं असलं तरी खायला इच्छाच होत नाही. हे सारखं रात्रंदिवस लोळत आहे, खायचं कसं.
D.Edच्या ॲडमिशनची जी प्रोसेस सुरू होती त्यावेळी D.D काढायचा होता आणि D.D काढत असताना सुद्धा एका बँकेमध्ये बँक ऑफ महाराष्ट्रमध्ये गेले आणि तिथं माझा नावाचा D.D नकुशी पांडुरंग देवकर असाच गेला. तिथले जे मॅनेजर होते त्या मॅनेजरनी मला बोलवून घेतलं आणि त्यांनी मला सांगितलं की तुझं नाव असं का ठेवलं. तेव्हा ते माझं नकुशी नाव तेवढ्या सगळ्या त्या लोकांच्या मध्ये झालं आणि प्रत्येक जण असा कुजबुजू लागला की नकुशी का ठेवलं, का ठेवलं, कशासाठी ठेवलं.
The attitude of son preference and aversion towards daughter is there throughout India. It manifests in different forms. Like in Maharashtra, you have a Nakusha, that means unwanted. Daughters are named as Nakusha. In Gujarat, they'll be called, generally when daughter is addressed, they would be addressing her as a Moi, that means a dead. And in North, we have a daughter is equated with darkness. And in Haryana and Punjab, they equate daughter's birth as sunset in the family, or son, when son is born, it is treated as a sunrise.
The Kushis were just 283, but Nahishis were 4,70,000 in Maharashtra in last 10 years. Not tsunami has killed so many people. Even not terrorist attack has eliminated so many human beings. But the medical terrorists have killed with the help of sonography machine 4,70,000 daughters from our state.
That is why we see a most distorted sex ratio among the children in India. It was clearly demonstrated in 2001 census, and surprisingly again we felt that things will improve, but 2011 census came as a rude shock where the child sex ratios deteriorated further, and we have far less number of girls compared to the boys in our country.
We were having law. Rest of the nation was not having law. We were having this law from 1988. Maharashtra is the first state in the world to enact the law called PNDT Act. But still, the sonography technology, pre-conception technology is moving around unregulated, and it is still misused to eliminate the daughter from the mother's womb to get rid of dowry and to tackle the security issue.
असं वाटलं नाही ना उगाच नाव ठेवलं आजीने.
म्हणती सगळ्यांचे नाव कसे ठेवले त्यांनी माझंच का म्हणून असं ठेवलंय.
माझं नाव दुसरं पाहिजे होतं. असं ऐकल्यानंतर नकोच नाव ऐकल्यानंतर ज्यांना जे मला म्हटले ना हा तुमचं नाव का आठवलं असं, तर ते ऐकल्यानंतर मला असं वेगळं वाटलं की माझं नाव ह्यांच्यासारखंच पाहिजे होतं. माझं नाव नको पाहिजे होतं.
We raised this issue as a social issue through health department, through our Jilla Parishad, through our DHO's office, where 286 Nakushis were located. The youngest Nakushi was of 9 months, and we decided that we will rename her. We will give her choice to select her own name, and we will eliminate at least that negative name, Nakushi.
मानसी संतोष मनीषा
ते आपलं आता ते शाळा मास्तरने स्वाती म्हणते.
अश्विता
चालते अश्विता म्हणा.
ठेवलंय का तसं काय रेणू का
नाही माधुरीच म्हणायला आली.
माधुरी मानला आली.
एक असं वेगळं काहीतरी जन्म झाल्यासारखं मला आता वाटतो, कारण नकुसा नावाच्या वेळी जे मी सहन केलं ते आता नवीन नावानंतर म्हणजे नम्रता या नावानंतर मला जे आता म्हणजे फिलिंग वाटतं की खरोखर मला याचाच आनंद वाटतो.
1-2 किलो पेढे घेऊन या
त्यांच्या थोडं
बारसं करूया आपण.
आजोबा खातीर नुसतं
नाही नाही आज नाही पण गावात वाटू.
आम्ही आजोबा आहे.
नाही ना मला
निर्मला ठेवली ना
डोंट कॉल नको सा.
मारतं की नकुसा नावानंच हाक मारतं. नम्रता नावानं कुणी मारत नाही. नकुसा घरचे सगळे नकुसच. शाळेत तर कुणी नाही, मॅडमच म्हणतात. शेजारचे नकुसच, सगळेच नकुसच.
आईने रेणुका म्हटलं तिच्या मागणं सगळी म्हणणार की हो. आईच म्हणत नाही म्हटल्यावर कोण म्हणणार सांगा मला.
मग आई काय म्हणते आता तिला? तुम्ही काय म्हणता?
नको सांग
बोला की.
आई रेणुका म्हणते की सगळ्यांच्या तोंडात रेणुका येईल का नाही? घरात रेणुका आहे.
जेव्हा मी सातारा म्हणता आईला आणि मम्मी शेजारच्या त्याला म्हटलं माझं वैष्णवी नाबद्दल तेव्हा म्हणलं आम्हाला कसं आम्हाला कसं म्हणाईल वैष्णवी.
तोंडात नाव पडले का नाही त्यामुळे ते पूजेला आमच्या ध्यान राहत नाही आणि तिला पूजा म्हणजे ऐकून घेत. तोंडात नाव पडल्या तर इथं बाहेर कोणाचं तिला मॅडम सगळं नकोशी मध्ये.
माझं नाव नम्रता ठेवलं, मात्र नकुशी हे नाव का ठेवलं हाच विचार लोकांच्या मनामध्ये येतो. आणि अजून सुद्धा मला विचारायचा प्रयत्न करतात, काय भानगड तुमचं नाव असं का ठेवलं. त्यामुळे कुठेतरी मनामध्ये अजून सुद्धा तो न्यूनगंड आहे की मी खरोखर काय चुकीचं काय केलं का, किंवा मी येऊनच जन्माला येऊन चुकीचं केलं का. हे सारखं कधी ना कधी माझ्या मनामध्ये म्हणजे येतच राहतं. बाकीचे लोक मला बोलतात व्यवस्थितरित्या चांगले, त्यांचं वर्तणूक माझ्याशी चांगली असते, पण मनामधला न्यूनगंड अजूनही गेलेला नाही. कारण शेवटी नकुशी हे नाव अशा मुलीचं ठेवलं जातं की ज्याच्या आईवडिलांना ती नको असते. आणि अशा कितीतरी मुली आहेत की त्यांना म्हणजे मुलगी ही एकतर ओझं असते आपल्या आईवडिलांना शेवटी, कारण ते भविष्याचा हे असतो. पण माझ्या बाबतीत सुद्धा तेच झालं. जरी नाव बदललं तरी मनामध्ये मात्र ते कधी ना कधी ते सलतच राहतं.
And I think I mentioned that about it's very difficult to write their feelings, their emotions in our papers or in thesis, and it's not possible to do that. And also that for me that basically you may notice that most of the visuals are with the parents only. It's a very sensitive issue, so you can't without their concern or without their what do you say? Permission, you can't shoot. That's one of the reason. And also another barriers is like I couldn't earlier. We had to do this document in a different format, but we couldn't do because most of the people are not allowing to shoot. It's a sensitive issue, and some of the visuals only for sound I took. But later part, I even that interviews with others also. I don't have any plan to do any interviews or particularly others. So I want to do it in a basically based on their own life, but it didn't happen. Finally, only I took some other interviews too, at least. So I waited 2-3 years to get to shoot, but I couldn't do that. So that's it. I think that you can ask some questions, and also you have a discussion with Dharshana also, and it will be good if some time is. Yeah. Okay, then it's okay. Time is there.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Thank you, Shijith. Actually, it was a really touchy documentation because we can see what they were trying to convey, and it really conveyed through your documentation. I have no words to say. It's really wonderful. Now, so both our presenters have successfully presented their presentation. Now the stage is open for discussion. Anyone having any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. You can ask it directly or through chat. I think already we have 2 comments or something like that. Let me check. Okay, so from Parvati L. The I Speak the Vulnerability, such an eye-opening documentary. I cannot think of the impact of psychological torture these girls must be going through. If being considered a girl is a curse, I cannot imagine the plight of the girl who are born physically disabled, mentally challenged in these families. It's a comment to you, sir.
Basically, that they not only this Nagusha, they are treating all the girls are the same way. That because it's a son preference is very prevalent in it's all over India. It's not only in Maharashtra. Even see that in our next state like that Tamil Nadu also there's this kind of system. So Vendam Pondu, Podam Pondu, and even in Kerala, because I know that I have 2 sisters. How much my parents prefer me better than my sisters. So it is everywhere in Kerala also in a different. I mean, like that it's only manifestation like that. What I say, it's only that changing that the perception or attitudes only. Otherwise, it's everywhere. So it's not only in Maharashtra or any other states. Even in Kerala also, you can see that if you can closely watching our family system, our society, still it is there. So I think definitely that so not only for mentally challenged or physically disabled, they are treating everyone like that. Even we were waiting for that comes for that Sri Krishna, like a seventh son will come. That son preference is very prevalent. That single even I believe that in that documentary itself that Varsha Deshpande was talking about that what about other people that they are killing, they are not allowing to born a child, I mean like girl child. So that is very well that most of the people who are well educated, well settled people are doing that. At least these girls can live. That is also that's a hard reality happening in India. So
Shijith, thanks for the nice presentation, and it's very good to hear you a touching topic. See, my question is, what are the way out from the present situation?
Present means like I think after that I couldn't go there. So I don't know what is happening, but I only knew that this Maharashtra government formed a commission and for that changing name, particularly in their certificates. After that, because I'm doing the thesis in other place, so I couldn't do any what I say. That, but the recent NFHS survey and all saying that our child sex ratio is increasing. It's kind of hopeful things are coming, but that exactly I also having that doubt whether it's correct or not. But this NFHS data is saying that it's improving. But even though that it's culturally rooted, that's why even you can see in Kerala also that things are there. So I don't think so, because for me that definitely this documentary and also that study itself changed a lot, particularly because I already mentioned that a privileged person gender wise as well as others. Also, I could, for me that it kind of changes happened in my life. Otherwise, if I could do this kind of work, definitely my attitude also same like others. So for me that so even I also consider that film making or this kind of things definitely that for myself only, because it's changed a lot. It's changing definitely that. So I believe also that when you begin to change yourself, you begin to change your society. So,
I was wondering, if others have questions, I just wanted to, just give a space to get the conversation going.
Oh,
I
sir,
really
there are big questions,
felt
but you initiate it, no? Because you are
sure.
both of you are supposed to talk about this thing, because you are both in the film as well as the screen, and you are reflecting on it. So I think better you people make a comment.
Sure. So I really like the documentary, and what I thought was impactful about the documentary is to make us think about the politics of naming. What does name mean? And I was thinking about the idea of speech act. So speech act in the communication theory is seen in terms of function, where an utterance can mean either the intention behind the use, purpose behind the use, or the effect it can have on the community who are listening to it. So you're always thinking about the addressee here, not just the addressee to whom it's being kind of conveyed, but the larger community who will be listening to it. So the naming here is also like calling your daughter Nakusa is also in many ways trying to tell God, like conveying to God very purpose that we do not want, so give us the son. So it was interesting to think about the idea of replacement, which was the kind of underlying logic at work. We do not want a daughter, we want a son. So I do not know what came across in your conversation with the community, but I would be curious to know more about how did they actually disentangle this kind of back and forth thing. You have a person physically like in flesh in front of you, and you see you don't want the person, so you're negating the presence of the person, erasing erasing them and making them invisible, but they are very well there, but you're expecting the next kid to be a boy. So I was just wondering about the kind of psychological kind of impact that it has both on the children, the girls, as well as how do they actually think about this idea of renaming. Because I know that like you mentioned, and your documentary also refers to the fact that government initiated this huge forums where they rename these children, but it's not the act of renaming at that point, but it's also about the accumulated kind of humiliation and trauma that you have witnessed over a period of time. So in your interviews with your respondents, did anyone talk about it? And again, because there is also larger politics behind these administrative decisions. It's happening in Satara, and I'm also thinking about how political decisions are also motivated by election and other kind of the perks that you wanted to show as tangible achievements of the government, where there will be short-term kind of benefits, but not a long-term process. We do not know about this because it's about the skewed gender ratio. But I'm also curious to know more about how people reflected on this policy of the act of renaming, because there is also this rural-urban divide, which I think your documentary rightfully places, because there is this rural hinterland and outskirts, and the rural geographical landscape to a great extent also mediates this idea of alienation that many of them feels. Not just being named as someone who's unwanted, but also the expendable nature of their very presence, that they can be away. So the wishing away, can you wish away someone? Can you kill someone? Can you? So the act of speech, the speech act becomes crucial, because naming and speech act is also about erasing and leaving people out whom you cannot physically do otherwise. You cannot kill, but you're also killing by articulating, verbalizing it. So those were some of the thoughts I had. And again, Pradap Joseph is like someone whom I know, and I really adore his work. So I'm glad that you got a chance to work with him, which leads me to the next question, which is about the larger independent documentary movement in Kerala. And Pradap Joseph is a key name there. So did you have conversations with other people who were part of this movement? Because the indie film circuit, which Pradap and others are part of, is also trying to create this idea of a critical spectator who is able to think and act, and also move away from the kind of entertainment-based media that's produced by larger mainstream productions. So was this the thematic focus of your project also aligning with the larger political impetus that many of these independent filmmakers have as part of their way of engaging with the documentary circles? I'll stop here for your response. Thank you.
Definitely, actually, you have a group. I'm also part of that group. You have this minimal cinema, so for independent experiment and independent cinema. Actually, we are screening, as well as that we have that OTT platform, like video on demand platform. You can also see that in minimal cinema website. You can watch many movies. So actually, we were friends, and I made this documentary without paying. So that we are friends. So I didn't pay, and things like because I was using my fellowship, like AR fellowship, for shooting purpose, so I couldn't give any money, and also because of our friendship, you'll definitely not more than that. The work should come out. So like that, we are working right now. Also, so many works are coming out, but only that because of this COVID situation, something is not happening. But even like Sudhir, it's all that kind of the friend circle is there. So it's an independent documentary and filmmaking. Definitely, it's making huge impact. Even that you may notice that Sexy Durga, that movie is Durga, that also got a lot of international attention. And Pradap was the camera person and cinematographer of that movie. So it is there, and also that you mentioned that the political, that definitely that NCP is behind it. So they were doing this work. It's very big work. It's a big event they did in there. But that impact, like renaming that, like the parents are not caring in that way. They usually even these girls also having the same kind of opinion, like okay, but the thing is that they are all conditioned. So definitely, even the woman also, they all want the son only. Then only they can survive. That's the ground reality. So whatever we are saying, we can say like that you can do that. You have to change, but the ground reality is totally different. As earlier also you mentioned in that presentation. So because when we are interviewing this kind of things, definitely that we are all are outsiders. I mean, outsider. Even I don't know that culture, and I don't know language much. I only know a little bit Marathi. So I have a translator. Even that I couldn't ask some of the questions continuously because that is a language. Even I have a memory, like first day of doing this shooting as well as that field work. So I just opened that camera and I'm waiting for that the mother and daughter sitting together. They were sitting together, and the mother suddenly said, "I don't want this girl at all." because I didn't care about this girl, that kind of things, because I couldn't understand all the words. But suddenly that girl cried a lot and went out. It was a shocking moment for me that first day. Then I stopped the camera. Even I deleted that visuals also, because I couldn't, as a sensitive person like me, I couldn't even get. And I went back to Mumbai and I told my supervisor I couldn't do this work, because for me it's very difficult to continue this kind of things. And again, he insisted, you can do, because it's a reality. Hard truth. You cannot escape.
Thank you so much. So
Yeah.
one thing I was thinking about was, it was very impactful, the sequence where you were asking them what name they would have loved to have if they were given a choice. I think that was very empowering. I would see that as the kind of feminist trace that I see in your film, because, giving a chance to the respondents to be part of the project, to ask them that, if you were able to initiate change, what would it look like? So the kind of tangible form change can take, and the future and hope that it can give for the community is something I think that sequence contained. Like you said, we do not see you there, but we know that you are there. So your presence is kind of invisible to a great extent. And, I really like the way you said about your own awareness of the kind of privileges you have, and language plays a crucial role. And there are multiple levels of translation of you with, whoever is helping you with the shoot. And Pratap also, the cinematographer doesn't understand the language either. So all of you are relying on other people, the social workers and other people who are much more rooted to the ground realities in Satara than you would. So I think that was interesting to know about other people being involved, it being like a collective exercise of knowing, understanding, and realizing what is possible, because not everything can be captured. Like you said, you had to, shut down the camera, because that was a moment where the existential crisis of this girl at that point when she breaks down is also making you wonder what the documentary is worth. So I think it beautifully kind of captures for us the need to have documentaries like this resonate with the larger issues. This is not a one-off thing. There are different kind of gender biases and some preference, which we can even see, like you said, in Kerala. But one last question I have is regarding the sound design of your project, because I think the music plays a crucial role. It cues us into also looking at the women, because there is one sequence where you bring all of them together. And I think one of you actually mentioned it in the comment about the eye. I think eye plays a crucial role. You're able to connect with all of these girls whom we have not known through the eye, through the sight. And they kind of connect to us in their vulnerability, and they're confused, they're perplexed, they do not know what is awaiting them now that they have a new name. A new name doesn't mean a new life, right? So I was just wondering about, what was it in your mind when you thought about the music design? Do you have a conversation with your sound designer about it, and the mood, the emotion, the tonality that you want to bring?
Basically, that in our the making style itself, because we are all are independent filmmakers. I made it in my one camera, like D550D camera. So I used that sound only, basically, that the lapel mic used. So some of the problem that basically that lapel mic didn't work properly, because we don't have much money to produce. And I asked some of the producers to help us, but they were saying in a different way. They need somebody else, and they need to change that all things. So we don't want to do like that. So in that case, basically we don't have much money. And also that because of this sound, music also, one of my friends did that, Akhil. So basically, the thing is like it was already existing music. I took, because I asked him permission, and he said that you can take. Because he also know that I'm struggling to, because we don't have that much of equipments and that kind of thing. So you only can do that creatively. Whatever that existing things available, we can do. that is we are doing. I mean, like last 10 years, we under minimal cinema as well as that that's collective. So I believe that you couldn't think in that way, because I know that the things like the sound and all very important, but in this it's all only mono only, so that sound didn't come. And even I also agree that this cinematically or visually or thematically, this documentary is nothing basically. So it had to improve a lot of things. It has a lot of problem. So I know that things, but I don't have any other options to do this. Because, as a student, I will not get much money, and also we our style is totally different. That most of the people didn't agree, because you know that the parallelly we are working, we are doing. So, some limitations is there, particularly that equipments and all. Basically, the cinema equipments also very important. It's a crucial role to get better sound, better visuals, better all other aspects. So that definitely lacking. And cinematic feel also had this is not the way our documentary style, because we had a different perspectives, but we couldn't do that. Basically, I think that the next film that is my what is it? My thesis also, PhD thesis also will come out. Definitely, I will do a better. Because now at least I had a training, got a training from IIT. It's a design department, so and that case at least I can do better. I believe that. But anyway, that we are doing, that's a more important reason. That independent filmmakers, they are creating some space, and I'm really happy at least you are considering that independent filmmakers and academicians like you are addressing this thing. It's definitely an important thing. And, thank you for that. So many people even here also, the Kerala also didn't notice may not. I mean, like.
But I actually think that this whole independent film tradition within which your film is falling into, that makes it much more provocative. Because like you said, most of the independent filmmakers are working with like shoestring budgets and, you know, not being able to pay, but still you're getting people to work with you because they all believe in this political vision of making change, of initiating kind of radical changes. So I have been following minimal cinema and MIG and, you know, other collectives in Kerala. So I'm getting a sense of where you're coming from and the need to also work with these kind of limitations, because limitations can also be productive, where, you know, you are very well aware of what your limitations are. You cannot just have a production value of, let's say, a film like Writing with Fire. And I don't know whether you're familiar with it. It's right now, it was in Cannes and, you know, had won a lot of awards. The production value is big. They were able to have people who can invest in it, which might not be possible for many documentary filmmakers in India, primarily because of the kind of, you know, artisanal mode that filmmaking, like documentary filmmakers use. It's a make-do system where you have people who will come and help you out, but you do not have like a huge financial backing that you can rely on. So I think, you know, the beauty of your project, I personally feel, is coming from the larger political cause that you believe in, both as part of the independent documentary tradition and the way in which it is making us think about the mode of production. Because it's always important to think of what is the way in which this film is being put together. There is a money factor, which is the kind of fulcrum around which film production, you know, is kind of situating itself. So I think, you know, I'm really appreciate the fact that you mentioned the very fact that work with this limitation. You're aware of, you know, other things you possibly could have done if you had financial support and other kind of resources. And that's something I think we need in Kerala. We need in actually the documentary film production in India. So I have one last question. I know that, you know, you are a PhD candidate and you are this is part of your MPhil thesis. But I'm just wondering about the kind of ethnographic impulse that we saw in this film. Is there something that you want to use in your PhD dissertation as well? Because I know that many of the participants today are also people who are writing their dissertation, and things are changing in India, where, you know, you can also have hybrid components to your dissertation, a film plus a written component. So I'm curious to know if you are talking with your advisors and coming up with a strategy to have these two components bridged together, film and dissertation. And if you have any thoughts on that you can share with our participants.
Basically, my now I am doing in color in cinema. Basically, it's an archival work. So color in Bombay, early Bombay cinema. So I'm digging like anything. So that documentary also will be in a different format because we can't do like this. It's totally a different mood and different. The visual also will be very different. We have to create something. We have to create also some. Sometimes maybe only have photographs or something like that. So you have to make it in that way. But definitely that I believe that I already mentioned that. So whatever we are doing, we are academicians. We are doing, but how we can communicate with these people? That's always. See, nowadays, that is, you all know Harari's book now became that's graphic novel. It's like, for example, they are trying to make it in more convincing. I mean, like that to reach more readers. Like anyone can understand that kind of thing. That is happening everywhere. To make it simplify, even that article writing also nowadays very simple way, the simple sentence you are using, and it's directly we are writing. So earlier things are changing like that. That we definitely we have to communicate as a researcher. I hope that almost all the people are here researchers and all. Definitely we have to think in that way. We have to interact with all people. So in that things we have to. The documentary is one way. There are another ways also we can approach. Even I'm a photographer, so I'm taking photos also, like taking a series of photographs like doors and windows. That's also kind of ethical concern. Like I want to tell stories of people without taking their image, but taking their homes, doors and windows. I'm telling so like that we can use different mediums in a different way. So I believe that only. Otherwise, whatever we are doing we are discussing in academic space, I think that will be it will get some pleasure and also like satisfaction. But more than that, we can do something or interact with this common people also will get more. What I say, so more benefit to each other's. I believe so. That is my thought.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful having this conversation. I'll stop there.
Thank you. So what now?
Thank you. I will interfere a little bit. Thank you,
Siddik, one second, Dharshana.
Yeah, you have a question, please.
Hi.
Hi, Dharshana. Very happy to see you. I missed your presentation, and thanks for the wonderful interaction. Okay, thank you.
Lovely to see you.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody want to talk? No. Okay. Thank you so much. Actually, both of you had, in fact, enlightened all of us. The way in which we can also intervene into research, which normally for an economist, this is quite unconventional. We never do research like this, but still. But there are a little bit changes happening across the world. So the disciplinary barriers, as well as the methodological kind of methods, different methods applying for research has actually been open to all of us. So I am not a conservatist, and I feel that all kinds of conservatism has to go when you want to really do research. So you should be flexible in making different methods to find a problem and a meaningful solution. So both of you have done, in fact, quite good, because what he was done is IIPS study. Normally IIPS never do this kind of a film-based work. But in that sense, he was done something unconventional, even within the ambit of his own research. So this is, in fact, a kind of roadmap to all of us to follow, especially in the social science research. And social science research, normally people used to say that you have no lab, you have nothing to worry, you can freely do whatever you like. And so we have to basically break all this convention, because we can't do something like that. This is a kind of a popular perception, I am saying, not my perception. I have no such a idea, or I never subscribe to that kind of a thing. So with this, I'm thanking both of you for your generous reflection on the issue of how we can basically reflect. And I also had last year a presentation on how we can treat film as a space or a data to discuss about the development. That has happened in the Institute of English. So in the University of Kerala. So I have a paper on that. So how we can see film as a shifting development space, and or what I call it is actually a data point to narrate the development trajectory of Kerala. So similar kind of work we can actually do. So thank you so much for both the presenters. Now I call Surya Thampi, the moderator, and she will be.
It's actually Jatin who is saying the word of thanks. Okay. So good morning to all. On the behalf of Department of Economics, University of Kerala, Karivattam campus, I'm so honorable to take this opportunity to propose a word of thanks. So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Dharshana Sreedhar, University of Wisconsin-Madison, for presenting an effective session on the topic, Role of Women in Screen. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation. And secondly, I would express my gratitude to Shijith PP, IIT Hyderabad, for presenting and talking about the evolution of his documentary named Nagusha and Wonder Is My Name, which shows that there still prevails gender discrimination and aversion to daughters in India. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful for presenting your wonderful documentary. And then I would like to thank Dr. Antavi, professor and head of the department, and Siddik, the organizing secretary of this webinar, and all other faculties of this department, of our Department of Economics, University of Kerala. And I would like to thank Surya Thampi, the moderator of 5th session, and Gouri P of the 2nd MA Economics for the welcome speech, and all other participants who makes this session successful. Thank you.
Thank you all. And now we break from the session, and I think the next session will be starting very soon. So after, I think, 10 minutes break. So we will continue with the session. Though it is an online platform, we have to actually continue our presentation in that sense. So 10:15 we will start. Now it is 10:06. So thank you all, and we will be back. Thank you, Dharshana and Shijith, for your presence, and I'm so delighted you accepted my invitation, and thank you.